Hello and welcome to Mountain Valley Today. I'm David Holt, and with me today is a good friend of mine, Mr. John Baker. Good to have you with us, Mr. John.
Hi, David. Glad to be here. Thank you.
We are in a studio today, and most people when they come, they're like, the lights are bright in here, and hot as everything.
But not as hot as the sun outside.
That's exactly right. Well, Mr. Baker is one of the candidates for sheriff for DeKalb County, and so, Mr. Baker, why don't you just tell us about you? I'm always curious to find out where you've been, where you lived, where you grew up, all your experiences. I think the people like to hear that.
Well, I'll try to be a little bit brief. I was born actually in Marshall County, in the old Sand Mountain Infirmary in Marshall County. I finished high school at Crossville, went to undergraduate school and law school at the University of Alabama, came back to DeKalb County, lived at Rainsville 17 years, practiced law in both Rainsville and Fort Payne. And then I took a job with Norfolk Southern Railroad that I meant to stay 1 to 2 years. 26 years later, I retired from that job. So, and then after that, I moved back to DeKalb County again, where both my mother and my wife's mother were still alive. And I'm cattle farming in DeKalb County right now.
And I hear that's the hardest job you can have is cattle farming.
It's not as hard as running for office, but it's pretty hard.
Well, years ago when I first came to Broadway, I met you then. That was many years ago. We've gone to church together off and on for a long time.
Yeah, we have. Like I say, 17 years we lived in Rainsville and went to Broadway. Then when we moved back to DeKalb County after I retired from Norfolk Southern, Regina's mother was still alive, Eleanor Holbrooks, and she was still a member at Broadway. So we came back to Broadway and have been members again at Broadway for the last nearly 10 years. So we've been members at Broadway for 27 or 8 years. Just a little bit, one thing I did not touch on is background in terms of experience in public service. I've served and elected the State House of Representatives, elected twice to the State Senate, and and so that's you know, I've kind of been involved in public service.
It's not your first rodeo in political office.
Not my first rodeo.
Well, why in the world are you interested in the Sheriff's Department? You've been House of Representatives, you've been in the Senate, so what attracted you to this job?
Well, it's a little bit hard to say, but I tell you, I've had so much of my life has been involved in public service, and I say I've been cattle farming. I got kind of those cows don't talk to you and communicate with you. There's not as much social interaction with cows, and so I looked around and I said, well, you know, I've still got a good bit of public service left in me. And I looked around, and our sheriff was retiring, and I've got I didn't talk about my background in the law, but I practiced law in DeKalb County. I spent hundreds of hours in court trying criminal cases, 12 murder trials. I tried 12 murder cases in DeKalb and Jackson counties. And so I know and understand the basic concepts of criminal law. I know a good investigation and a bad investigation when I see one. I can look at a file that the investigators have done, and I can tell, I'll have a pretty good idea, well, that case looks like a pretty good case. We're ready to send that to the district attorney's office. Or I can look at it and I say, well, you know, there's some more questions here. You investigators, y'all need to go back and do a little more on this. So I think that'll be a big help. So all of that kind of background, and plus the fact I've been in some leadership role since I was in high school, from president of my high school senior class to vice president of my law school senior class to service in the state legislature and service in the state senate. So I've been with Norfolk Southern. My last job in Norfolk Southern, I supervised 8 states in our government relations department. I had to write employee evaluations. I had to supervise staff and manage our department in 8 states. So my entire life has been a continuous stream of leadership and personnel management, that sort of thing. And every bit of that is directly transferable to the sheriff's office.
Well, that was my next question about qualifications, and you just took that ball and ran with it, which I'm telling you, I did not know all of that before. You know, being an attorney, trying cases in DeKalb County, I'm sure that's very difficult to do, the murder cases you've had to try those things.
Well, it requires a lot of knowledge, of the same kind of knowledge. As a matter of fact, the same kind of knowledge sheriffs ought to know and need to know, but they rarely do. But that experience gives me that knowledge. And I might point this out. One of the criticisms that some of my opponents' supporters make, they say, well, he never has been a policeman and he never has been a deputy. Well, my experience in leadership, management, organization, personnel development is more important than being a policeman. I'll give you this example. Somebody told me this the other day. They said, you know, the U.S. Constitution says that the president shall be the commander-in-chief of the most mighty military force in the world. Yet the last 4 presidents, not a single one of them ever served in the military. That's not a bad analogy. We elect the presidents based upon their ability to lead, to hire the Secretary of Defense, which might be equal to our chief deputy,
right,
and to hire the generals, which might be equal to our deputies and what have you. So I'd rather have that kind of experience as experience with somebody who has been a policeman before, but they've never been in a supervisory role and never had to manage people. So for that reason, I've said, well, I'm by far the most qualified, and it's not even close. But that's what I mean by that,
right,
is those qualifications that I have, to me, are far superior to just having been a policeman. It's good to have been a policeman, but we've got a chief deputy, and we've got all these deputies, and they've been policemen. But somebody's got to know how to manage them and pull all that together, and that's what I think. That's what makes me the most qualified.
I appreciate that answer. Let me ask another question. You know, as you look at the current Sheriff's Department, what is one thing you'd like to change? Like your number one priority, I want to change this.
Yeah.
And you may not know, but I'm just curious.
Well, I got that exact same question on Facebook this week. And first of all, until I get to be sheriff and do the analysis that I need, I'm not going to know. Right. There are several things I want to know that would help me determine changes. For example, first of all, we've got the deployment of forces, both in terms of geographically and in terms of the shifts. We've got about 40 deputies in the sheriff's office, but at night in DeKalb County, quite often there's only 2 deputies on duty in the entire county, one on the north end and one on the south end. Well, that's not hardly acceptable. So, you know, there needs to be an analysis geographically as to where to disperse those deputies, and also shift-wise, is how many ought to be on this shift and this shift and this shift. So, to me, that's a change that's important. Other changes, you know, one thing I'm kind of committed, I'm not going to make at least initially, I'm not going to make wholesale changes in personnel. Basically, then it's not 100%, but our sheriff's department has some really outstanding leadership and employees. I want to keep every honest and hardworking employee. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood. I didn't say I'm going to keep everybody. I said I want to keep the honest and hardworking employees. If I catch somebody that doesn't fit that category, well, they can hit the road, you know. Yeah. But so in terms, I'm kind of answering your question, not only what changed, but what I'd keep in place. But there are many questions of personnel, allocation of personnel, policies, that I'm just like my opponent in that regard. He was a deputy for a short period of time, a long time ago, but neither of us know the innermost workings of the present sheriff's department. So both of us are going to have to get out. Now, my opponent says I saw in some of his campaign literature before the primary, he's going to clean house. Well, that's not, I think that would be devastating to the sheriff's department. Just cleaning house, I don't know what that means, except it can't have anything to do with the sheriff, because the sheriff's gone. He's not running for re-election. So that's got to mean other people who are there. And so I don't think that's the proper approach. I think you ought to get in there, keep the good, weed out the bad as you learn the situation.
Yeah, that's very understandable. Well, let me ask you, change direction just for a little bit. When, if I were to ask my wife, what is my greatest weakness, she might have a different list than I do. But one of the things I will say is I have a hard time telling people no. You know, that is a shortcoming that I would just assume I don't want to disappoint someone. We all have something that we have to work on. What would you like the people to know is a weakness that you might have that you're going to have to work on?
Well, I wouldn't really like that people know what my weaknesses are.
Well, that's a valid point.
You know, I think my weaknesses, David, I might just keep to myself. I'm not saying I don't have any, but if you want my weaknesses, you know where to get them. Go ask my wife.
I'll go catch her on the left side of church over there. Well, let me go a different route then. As the sheriff, you deal with difficult situations. You know, you've dealt with difficult people and situations in your life. Can you share any of those with us? How you've dealt with a difficult person or a difficult situation? And as an attorney, you may not want to talk about those. But
Well, it's kind of, I'm just trying to think a little bit. You know, I don't ever remember having a real serious conflict personnel-wise in my role at Norfolk Southern, where I supervised 8 states and the personnel involved in that. I never had a conflict. I think I get along with people good. I think, you know, I expect them to do their job and do it in the right sort of way. But I've had difficult decisions to make in my life related to a case or something like that. And I've had clients maybe difficult to work with, but I've never had anything serious that wasn't resolved in some amicable way. I just can't think of an example to tell you of a problem of a situation that really gave me a lot of long-term problem.
I got you. Well, let's talk about technology. What do you think about technology? I know for years ago I was a term on the city council working with the police department trying to make sure they had the latest technology that they needed. Do you have any thoughts about technology in the sheriff's department, things we might need or we need to seriously consider looking into?
Well, I do know this generally, that the sheriff's department, what I know of, they have pretty much adopted the recent technology. You know, for me, when I need to know something about technology, I know exactly where to go. I go to my grandkids. But
isn't that the truth?
Yeah. But I know the sheriff's department has really some kind of an amazing technology, and I'm not exactly familiar with it. I know they had to send some deputies. They had to send some deputies for training, and this is a little bit of a problem in that the budget from the county commission does not have any money for training. So the sheriff has to cobble training money out of pistol permit fees and anywhere they can get it. One example, there was in his own technology, the federal government paid several $1,000s to send some deputies. I've forgotten where it was, it's out of state, but at a cost of several $1,000s, there was a grant to the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office. And the sheriff's office, all they had to pay was the airfare and hotel room out there. And so it was a heck of a bargain for the county, but my opponents made a big deal out of that being wasted money, paying hotel bill and airfare, but it was for real critical training in an area of technology that we just had to have, and it was a heck of a bargain. But you can take, even a bargain, you can take and twist it and make it look like something bad. But there's one example. So I think when I become sheriff, I certainly will examine from a technology standpoint the programs and what's available. But the technology in law enforcement has advanced so much from the time I practiced law that, but that's something that I know they do participate in, and I certainly want to take advantage of any technological advances that are out there.
Well, one of the questions a little bit further down was all the money that the Sheriff's Department gets comes from the county commission or the state of Alabama. Those revenues comes in. And I was going to ask you, what kind of experience you had with working with our state and local and state people to get revenue, but I think you pretty much have had, being in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, you sort of understand the workings of how you lobby to get some money for your group. So any thoughts about getting revenue working with the county commission for that?
Well, here's the thing, that it is true that my experience in the legislature and working with Norfolk Southern too, I know the budgetary processes of counties and cities and the state, and I had some federal experience in contact at the federal level with Norfolk Southern. But DeKalb County is a difficult situation in that we're not a wealthy county, and the county commission, I think, does the best they can do, but the budget from the county commission is not adequate. I'm not criticizing the county because they got all the county's financing, but our sheriff's department has to do with, in my view, less revenue than it needs. Now, there's two sides to that story. If you look back when I was a young lawyer starting practicing law here, they might not have had but about 6 deputies in the whole county. And now there's like 40. You say, wow, you know, that sounds like a lot of deputies. But look, when I first started practicing law in DeKalb County, a big deal for the deputies, they spent a lot of their time just busting teenagers with a 6-pack of beer. You know, we look at that now and look at that, wow, how harmless was that? And that's what law enforcement was doing. But the problem today with the drug situation, we have an epidemic of the drug situation, and so even that 40 deputies now compared to 6 when I first started practicing law, it's all you can do just to keep up. And so the budget from the county commission, and here's another point that's become an issue a little bit in this campaign, is my opponent has taken several different positions. In his early campaign literature before the primary, he says he's going to eliminate the pistol permit fee. He said, why should you have to pay a fee for something that's a constitutional right, to carry a gun? Well, that sounds well and good, and a lot of people think that's good, but here's the problem. Our pistol permit fee brings in about $160,000 a year. That's the only source of training money. That doesn't go to the sheriff. None of that goes to the sheriff. It's audited. It all has to go to legitimate law enforcement purposes. But it buys ammunition. It's critical. That $160,000 is absolutely critical to our sheriff's department. So, yes, it sounds good to eliminate any kind of fee or any kind of tax, but I would say I'm not going to take an irresponsible position and say that I would do away with the pistol permit fee unless, first of all, the sheriff can't do that. The legislature sets the pistol permit fee, but if a legislator came to me and said, I want to eliminate the pistol permit fee or reduce it some amount, I'd say, well, here's what that would cost, and here's what we do with that money. Now, which taxpayer do you want to have to up their taxes to replace that money? But the pistol permit is optional. You don't have to have a permit except to carry a pistol concealed, because we're an open carry state. You can have a pistol in your car, on your person, as long as it's not concealed. You don't even have to have a permit. So this is a tax in a way that's optional. So if you eliminate that tax or that permit fee, then you're going to have to ask some taxpayer somewhere to pay a mandatory tax to make that difference up. So I would hope that people, I know most recently my opponent's gone around to volunteer fire departments and rescue squads, and he says, I'm going to make the pistol permit free for every first responder. Sounds great. I'm all for that if you tell me which taxpayer you're going to ask replace that money, because the sheriff's department cannot do that without that money. And while we're on pistol permit fee, right now the legislature did change it where I believe over 62 or 65, anyway, for seniors, that's been reduced to $1. Well, that does not nearly cover the cost of issuing pistol permit fee. I don't know what it is exactly, counting the time. It's probably $2.50, $3 it costs the sheriff's department to issue a pistol permit fee. So, I hate to be the one not to just openly endorse the elimination of pistol permit fee, but what taxpayer, the county commission is putting all they can. The county commission is putting up about $10 million a year, and you say, well, pistol permit fee is a small drop in that bucket. Well, it's a pretty important drop, though. I can't support eliminating the pistol permit fee and go back to the county commission with my hat in hand and say, okay, guys, I agree to do away with that pistol permit fee. Now, y'all come up with the money to replace that, because we've got to have those things we use that for.
To cover whatever that revenue covered. A lot of people don't realize, they just think, well, you can, a lot of monies that you receive are earmarked for certain things.
Right.
And you just can't change it on your own or on a whim. It's tied with strings, and you have to be careful with that. A lot of people don't understand that and when you talk about government. One thing that I think is important as the sheriff, when the news comes on, they're always at the law enforcement with the cameras trying to catch them misspeaking or something, it's like they're trying to get you, you know. But as the sheriff, you will be the main spokesperson for our county. If there's anything controversial, any kind of crisis, you're the person. So are you comfortable with being that spokesperson with the cameras just like we are today with the lights on, except they'll be a little bit closer to us?
Well, yes. I say this, I don't think anybody could say they'd be comfortable in a crisis dealing with the media, but I think I've had enough experience with it. I've filibustered enough in the state Senate, and I've made enough speeches on the floor of the legislature, and I've in my work in government relations, both in Washington and Montgomery, let's say I think I can do that job. Who would want it, in a sense, I'm not. I hope I would never get comfortable trying to address media in a time of crisis, but I think it's a job that I've got the experience to do.
Well, it sounds as though you have, with all the political experience you have in working with Norfolk Southern as well, and working at the Washington. Well, how do you handle stress?
Well,
is it the cattle farm? You go sit on the back porch?
I guess everybody handles stress in a different way. I think I turn most of my stress internal, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but nobody likes stress, but I've dealt with lots of it in my life. Though through trying a murder case is stressful. Trying to advise a client who's got a real tough legal situation is stressful, because you hope you don't give them the wrong advice, So I've had enough stress in my life that I have learned how to deal with it. Like I say, I think I deal with it internally, maybe too much. I think it's better to get it out, but I think I've got a lot of experience dealing with it.
So you ready for this huge amount of stress that's coming your way?
Well, I hope so.
I'm sure your wonderful, lovely wife will help you with that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, how would your best friend describe you?
That's a good question. How would my best friend describe me? I don't really know. You'd probably have to ask my best friend, but that's hard. I couldn't describe myself in the way I describe. I wouldn't.
Probably a different view.
It's a different view, and I'm just modest enough, wouldn't want to brag on myself. I hope my best friend would brag on me and would say kind things about me that I wouldn't say about myself. I know I'd feel more comfortable describing my best friend than describing what my best friend would say about me.
Well, if the camera guy was describing me, it wouldn't be positive. Oh, my goodness. Well, what accomplishment in life are you the most proud of?
Most proud of? Most proud of, don't know if it's an accomplishment, the thing in life I guess I'm most proud of would be my family, my children, my grandchildren. I've got 3 grown lovely daughters and 7 grandchildren, and we've had the best time. When I retired from Norfolk Southern, we came back to DeKalb County. We bought a farm because my happiest memories in my childhood were spent on my grandmother's farm down in Marshall County, just across the DeKalb County line, with first cousins.
Yeah.
And gosh, they've taken me snipe hunting and done, all kind of stuff that wasn't all that much fun, but it made great memories.
Yeah.
And so we've done that. We've had a camp for all 7 of our grandchildren every year for the last 10 years. And that's what we created, tried to create an environment that to me was the happiest memories of my childhood, and it's worked. We've had a good time. They've about outgrown it now, but we've had a good time.
Well, and 3 daughters to get married. I've never had to give my daughter away to marriage, and expecting our first grandchild coming up in January, and I hear that is a wonderful, wonderful experience.
It is. Yeah, nothing like grandchildren. That's been the highlight. We basically planned our retirement and planned our life after retirement to spend that time with grandchildren. Your grandchildren, it's not like your children. Your children are with you forever. But your grandchildren, when they get up and start dating and then they marry, well, then when they get married, they got 2 sets of parents, his and hers parents. Yeah. So the grandchildren, your time with grandchildren has got to be up to about 15 or 16 years old. And that's what, we knew that, and we planned our retirement. I retired earlier than I would have otherwise for that purpose, but it's worked exactly as we hoped. It's been a great last 10 years with grandkids.
Well, Mr. Baker, I've known you for a long time. I've learned a lot today just sitting here and having a conversation with you. And that's one thing I want to give you the opportunity to do, as people will be watching this on Facebook or the internet or on Farmers Telephone TV. People are going to be looking for, trying to decide who to vote for. So I want to give you the last couple of minutes to look at the camera and convince that voter who's watching today or a later time why you're the candidate that they seriously need to bubble in beside your name when it's time to vote for the sheriff of DeKalb County.
Well, sure, David, I'd be glad to. And I guess I could address that one way is to address some of the things my opponent says about me. Number one, they talk about my age, and that's a fact that I'm older than my opponent, but I think I could stand up good with him in a foot race or working on the farm. But noticed the other day, I'm virtually the same age as our president and virtually the same age as our governor. And if I'm young enough to be president or governor, I'm certainly young enough to be sheriff, which is far less stressful than any of those other jobs. So that would be one point, and the other is qualifications. And I think I mentioned, I really believe that I'm by far the most qualified, and that it's not even close, even though I've never spent a day as a policeman. But just like I said, with the president, the Constitution makes the president the commander-in-chief of all of our military might. Yet our current president and the last 3 before him never served a day in the military. So leadership and my life and my history at every level from a teenager on has been in some leadership role. And the Sheriff's Department will be no stronger and no better than its leadership. Vince Lombardi one time, he used to tell his Green Bay Packers, legendary coach, he'd say, we're going to strive for perfection. I want all of you, and everything you do, we're going to strive for perfection. Now, I know we can't achieve perfection, but if we set our goal as perfection, we will at least achieve excellence. And that's an attitude that I want to carry to the Sheriff's Department. I want to talk to, and I'm going to spend some time talking in small groups. I want them to think in terms of what is the perfect way to do your job. What's the perfect way to serve the meal in the jail? What's the perfect way to do your job? And I want you to try to do that perfectly. But I'm not going to fault you if you don't reach perfection, but I do expect you. I expect everybody in the sheriff's office to be excellent in their job. And I think if we achieve excellence, we can have the best sheriff's department in the state.
Well, Mr. Baker, I have enjoyed spending some time with you today, and we hope that you've learned a lot about John Baker. Like I said, I've known him for a long time, and we go to church together, but we don't ever get to spend time together. So it's been a pleasure this afternoon. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And you've been watching Mountain Valley Today right here on the internet, and we hope you'll stay tuned to us again for our next show.